Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course that makes this episode 15 of Circles and Squares. And Kate, you know what? I think I've gained like 3 pounds because we just had Thanksgiving here up in Canada, and I've eaten like 3 days worth of turkey over the last little bit.
Not only that, but for both Thanksgiving dinners we had, there was 2 desserts for each one. Like it was we've extreme.
Had like, birthday celebrations, Thanksgiving, everything rolled into one.
Yes.
Of course, socially distanced with our little bubbles, COVID-19 safe and everything like that. But man, like I just feel like I'm sweating gravy at this point.
Sweating gravy. That's right. My blood is cranberry sauce.
Oh God, that's how I feel. Like it's just it's too tempting because you can't leave the leftovers in the fridge for too long. The stuffing gets soggy.
Yeah, you don't want soggy stuffing.
You don't. But you know what? One thing I find that the turkey actually is better left over.
Right? I almost prefer like the turkey sandwiches, or even like if someone makes turkey soup afterwards, that's almost better than the actual dinner.
In a nice soup.
Yes. Oh, put that in your freezer and
Wow. Well, happy Thanksgiving to everyone here in Canada, and of course in the States too. I think theirs is coming up, right?
I think it's November.
In November? Yeah, I don't know. They go all out like we do, kind of, but yeah. They go crazy. I don't know. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, be thankful, and all that. And we're thankful for video games on this podcast because that's what we're here to talk about. Of course, like always, Kate, we will be starting the show with talking about the games we've been playing, including our PS Plus choices for the month of October. We will then be getting into the news segment as usual. And then finally, for the end of the show, the third segment, we'll be talking about our favorite bosses in video games, and then ending off with a listener mail question, as we usually do. So Kate, I think I will start off the show today by telling you about a game I've been playing called Star Wars Squadrons. So this game, have you ever played a flight sim? Like, much experience?
I played, I think, the first level of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Like,
did you actually?
Way back when. I mean, not properly with the like setup or anything, and it was like just like the most basic like tutorial level. But that is my experience.
That's pretty much. I've only played like some PS2 or PS3 versions of Ace Combat very, very briefly. So this is basically my first ever flight simulator experience, and I gotta say, I really, really liked it. This game, I think, I wouldn't say it's like a game of the year contender for me, and when you boil it down to what else has come out this year, but it's definitely something that I've enjoyed. And if I was to make like a top 10 list of games from the year, this would certainly be on it.
That's pretty high praise.
And I'm not a big Star Wars guy either, which is because so many people will get into this and be like, I love Star Wars. I'll play any Star Wars thing that comes out.
Yeah, that's the draw for a lot of people. It's like, oh, Star Wars.
Maybe not Battlefront with all those microtransactions BSs, but yeah, so Star Wars Squadrons. This game, it is Star Wars through and through. Like the sound effects, I'll just get out of the way. Like the graphics, the sound effects, the design of the characters and the ships and everything, I think is quite authentic to how the cockpits look.
Right. And do you get to play in some of the like iconic ships from the movies, or is it just
so you actually fly for the Republic? There's the X-Wing, the A-Wing, U-Wing, Y-Wing. I know these ships now because of the game. Of course everyone knows the X-Wing, right? But
I mean, at this point too, is like the B-Wing, like maybe that one
that probably is a thing
that might exist.
But no, it is authentic based on the movies. Like any of these ships you will have seen in Star Wars lore, like somewhere around there, like whether it's the X-Wing or whatever they are, they're all like canon ships. They're all real things, and they're recreated very faithfully. Like if you were to, I'm sure, look at a model of what the inside of the ships look like in the movies, it's very well recreated here. So it's really, really cool to see that. And I wish I had a PSVR to experience this game in VR and actually get to look around and see what's going on in the ship, kind of like on the display panels a little bit more,
right?
Because they're so well thought out. And what was really cool is everyone has a different layout, but you feel at home no matter which one you're playing in. Like there's the same gauges, they look a little bit different. The same kind of, it displays how much ammo you have on your special weapons, your radar, but they're all laid out differently in a way that is familiar yet makes you feel different when you're playing as a different ship.
Right.
The same as you would playing as a different character in like a fighting game or something.
Right, exactly. So like it's playing one kind of sets you up nicely to play other ones, but it's still worthwhile and unique to swap out.
And the more you play too, they really do begin to feel different. Like the X-Wing is like the overall, just to break them down quickly, the X-Wing is like the overall like well-rounded ship. It's got some guns, it's got some support stuff. You can heal yourself if you want, stuff like that.
That's Mario.
Yeah, the Mario. And then you got the bomber, which is slower and has the heavy weapons kind of to take down like bigger Imperial ships. Not so much like dogfights with the one-on-one smaller ships. Then you have the A-Wing, I think, is the small one. It's basically the opposite, where you're really good at dogfighting, but you can't really take on the more sizable space cruisers. And then the last one is the support ship. So you fly around and you're giving your teammates shields or resupplying their ammo, or you're disabling systems on enemy ships and whatnot. So it's a good kind of synergy. And I haven't played too much of the online yet. I went and played a couple matches the other day, and I really, really like it. But kind of just figuring out, like, okay, we've got this objective, like we got to destroy this enemy ship. So we want like 2 bombers as opposed to like 2 of the smaller ships, because it's not like it doesn't really matter if you kill enemy fighters or not in certain objectives anyway. So it's got some good variation. But so I played through the campaign, right? And this is where the game is very interesting, because I would say the campaign itself is just a big tutorial, and I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there for Star Wars fans in terms of like lore and name drops,
right? Little references and things.
And there's a few characters that even or one in specific that I recognize from one of the newer Star Wars movies, who's kind of like one of the generals on the rebellion side. So he shows up, and I'm sure people would really like that. For me, it's like, oh, I know that guy. Like, I feel like this is cool, whatever. But the to be honest with you, like the story and the characters, as someone especially who's not really into the Star Wars scene, it didn't really do a whole lot. Like, there's not really a lot of memorable moments or character moments or anything like that for me.
That's not what they focused on so much.
And especially when you play, because you play good and bad halves of the story. The bad guys, like especially the Empire, is totally like a letdown as far as their characters, because they just have one that's like, I'm gonna kill everyone, like let me at him, I'm gonna kill him, and like they're all just cold and calculated and emotionless, and I couldn't really be bothered. The rebel team, the good guys, they're a little bit more likable, but even still, they're like, hope and teamwork and all that stuff, but it just doesn't really.
They're a little bit more like kind of generic caricatures.
They are. So, but getting us outside of the actual plot and the story, the missions themselves and the actual gameplay, I really like it. Is just short enough to where there's not too much repetition. It's only about 6 or 7 hours to beat the whole thing,
right?
Depending how much you suck, like me when I started. and it's a good ride all the way through. And the game just has this amazing learning curve, I would say. And it's one of those ones. You ever have a game where usually what it is, it starts out really simple, and then gets really, really complicated. And it's not that this one doesn't get more complicated, but you just get more familiar with how you play. And then by the end of it, I actually found it that I was getting good enough to where it didn't seem as challenging as the first few missions, even though it was simpler.
Right. It's almost like, I don't know, this gives like a totally different kind of game, but when they explain it, almost makes you think of something like Overcooked, where like it's very simple what you actually like need to do, but like you become so familiar with how like each ingredient and each thing is little mechanic is supposed to work, and then you just sort of like all of a sudden it's quite seamless, and you feel like you've really progressed a lot, even if you're doing the same kind of like basic things. Yeah, totally. So just to give you an idea of the depth of this game, I need to explain like all the different controls you have for your ship, because it's fucking crazy. So you start off, you're flying around. If you can imagine, I don't know how familiar this is for people who have played a lot of flight sims, but on the dual sticks, you have the right stick kind of lets your plane look left and right, and it can imagine you're on a skateboard. You can kind of turn it left and right at a very like minimal angle. That's kind of like the right stick. I resent the skateboard reference, but we'll go with it. And then up and down on that stick is to quite literally like angle up and down, like to increase or decrease your altitude. Then the left stick is if you push left or right, it tilts, like so you can barrel roll with it. Okay. Your like wobbles back and forth like a seesaw. I'm using my hands here. You can't see that. Sorry. And just follow along at home, guys. And then up and down on the left stick is your throttle speed. So it's a bit of a weird control scheme, but like I said, once you play enough, it becomes very familiar. Yeah, that's weird too, because there's like not really anything else like it. Like you can't compare it to driving games because there's no like up and down like axis that you also have. It's weird. But the game is so much more than just the flying. Like once you wrap your mind. Once you wrap your mind around that, you've got just so many other little tweaks you can make. So you have your ship has lasers, engines, and shields, obviously. Some ships don't have shields, but they all have a variation of those three things. Lasers and engines, of course, every ship. And so what you can do is the game begins to teach you and layer these things on every mission during the story, where they're like, okay, well, if you're fighting someone, you can divert power from your other systems to your lasers to do more damage. And so they don't cool down, they cool down quicker and stuff like that. So you can push a certain button, one of the D-pad buttons, to power lasers. Or similarly, you can do it so if you're trying to catch up or get in or, chase someone down or escape from somewhere, you can divert your power to your engines. So you can be weaker, less shields, but you can go faster. Right. And same for the shields. And so you begin to start doing that kind of thing. Then you can... Later on, it introduces you, well, hey, you can actually cut the power to your other systems and completely give it all to those other systems.
Oh, okay.
So you can then turn your engines off and have even stronger guns.
But that sounds very high risk, high reward kind of thing.
It is, but it's just kind of like the layering on the game. And then you also get into things like you have missiles, or what do they call countermeasures when you can when you're getting tracked by a missile, like a homing thing, you can shoot some flare out the back of your ship and distract from it.
Right, you can hold the banana behind your cart as you
yes,
go.
Mario Kart. You can also do boosting. It's not they go to, what's it called? Hyperspeed, light speed, whatever.
Light speed, super fast.
It's not like that, but you
it's
can.
Go time.
Yeah, it's go time. Time to go. You can boost. Accelerated boost for a short amount of time, and you can also drift to a stop by holding a direction and letting go of that at the same time. You can there's all kinds of different targeting things you can assign. You can put lasers on your ship that are less powerful, but they have a bit of homing on them. Basically, it just, you have full customization of how you want to set your ship up. There's a lot of different weapons you can equip. You get your main lasers on your R2, and then L1, R1 are auxiliary things. So if you're playing support, that might be the shield button for your teammates, or you could put bombs, different lasers. You can put mines. There's just a lot of variation, and it begins to stack on itself in a way where you kind of look back at where the campaign starts, and you're like, I can't believe how in depth this turned out to be.
Yeah, that sounds actually very intimidating. So the fact that they were able to do it in kind of a natural and easy way to progress and build upon it is really impressive, because imagine just sitting down and having all of those controls out the gate, and that would be very intimidating.
That's the thing, you do have them out the gate, it just doesn't tell you. So
yeah.
So you can kind of do it that way as well. Definitely, if you get this game, play the campaign before you play the multiplayer. Because if you jump into multiplayer and you don't know how to do these controls, you will get your clock cleaned by these people. Even the AI will destroy you if you don't know what you're doing.
Right, because there's a lot of nuance and strategy involved with what you do.
There's a ton. And I wish... The thing about the game is it's very much okay, well, we're fighting these dogfights, then the big, those big triangular ships that the Empire has.
They're really flat ones.
They're flat, right? Yeah. And it'll show up, and so you can it'll be destroy the cruiser. The first time you do it, you'll go and just bomb it. It's all good. And then the next time one shows up, they're like, hey, well, this ship has onboard systems targeting systems, shield systems, and if you go destroy the certain part of the ship that is in control of that, then it'll shut that system down, and you won't have to worry about it anymore. So it begins, not only are you targeting certain ships, you're also targeting different parts of the ship to break them down, and it really has a high level of strategy in that way, because depending on what ships you have, hey, we got some people on our team that are using bombers. We need you to take the shield down with a faster ship that can fly in under the shield, take it out, and then the bombers can come. And it's just it's very teamwork oriented, which I really appreciate.
Right. That sounds really cool. And it also sounds very quintessential Star Wars is always we have to take the shield reactor down, or there's always kind of a multi-step process to getting through these.
And there
these
is one mission too, how the famous scene where Luke has to go down the little trench, and he flies and he has to shoot his little laser into the little compartment of the engine, whatever Death Star part that is. Star Wars fans are going to crucify me.
Right.
But there's stuff like that in this game too. You fly down little trenches and you had to drop bombs into power reactors and stuff. So it kind of recreates that iconic Star Wars scene, because it is iconic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone knows, or a lot of people know about it. So that's kind of cool. My one criticism of the game is just that it's very easy to lose where you are, because you're in space, and they do a pretty good job of variation in terms of locations. We're in an asteroid field, so there's rocks kind of floating around, or we're at a space station, and so the environment is kind of centered around this
this, ship, or it'll have like a cosmic kind of blue smoke in the background, or like a nebula. I don't know what that's really called.
And some of the environments are quite pretty. Like you sent a couple screenshots and like a couple of them were gorgeous.
They are beautiful. Like if you get the certain angle, the problem becomes that not the whole environment looks like that. Like you are in space and it's dark. And if you kind of, it's very easy when you're trying to evade missiles or something, you're kind of, flying in loop-de-loops and twisting around, and you kind of can lose where you're at.
Right.
And it has indicators on the screen, and you have your radar on your ship as kind of like to where your objectives are. But because you have like so many planes of movement as far as like up, down, like you're in this big, vast 3D space.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself getting lost quite a bit. And the game does have like targeting settings where you can go on like a targeting wheel and be like, okay, show me where my teammates are. Show me where the enemies are.
Okay.
Highlight the shield system on the enemy ship. But the markers only do so much to point you in a direction. Like you still have to kind of orient yourself.
Right.
And I think maybe it's a lack of familiarity with this type of game, but I did find that kind of challenging. And especially there was one mission where we had to destroy it was the mission where they were teaching me to destroy the different systems on the capital ships. And they're like, okay, go attack the shields. And it just becomes tough to know exactly which, because they're quite small. I should back up. Like the ship itself is humongous, but the little part that is like the shield generator is actually quite small. And because of the speed of the game and just the way you attack it, it's kind of hard to see. Like similarly, destroying that ship, it's got a cool system in the game where if you're shooting at a ship and you kind of explode like the bottom left-hand corner, it'll start smoking and falling apart. But then like your next attack on that same area of the ship will do less damage because it's already considered broken.
Right.
So I got to this part where they're trying to teach me this, and the whole ship just looks like it's on fire, burning, smoke, like everyone's probably dead in there. But and I'm just keep shooting at the ship, like it must almost be dead, right? It must be close. And my team's just like, it's already damaged there, attack the undamaged part. And I'm just like, fuck, I can't find out. I don't know where the undamaged part is. So I'm just like flying around, and it got a bit frustrating just to like identify exactly what they wanted me to do. But I mean, I don't know if it was my fault or what.
Right.
I just kind of felt like frustrated by that.
It's one of those moments like, am I wrong? Do I suck? Or like,
yeah, it was just because in a normal match, I don't think it would work out that way. You just do less damage if you're shooting a damage portion.
But
for the tutorial,
part.
I was kind of like put off by that. Whatever, it was just one mission. The last thing I have to say about this game is that I think this has been brought up a lot online by just people who played, but this game was so obviously, to me, supposed to be a VR only game and was brought into like a bigger scope.
Oh, okay.
I think when they realized they had something pretty good, because there's something about the perspective when you're not in the ship, kind of in the hangar, like, looking around. You can look around and from a first person point of view and like look at the different people and talk to them and whatever. But just the way that the angle they give you and the way that they do the face-to-face interactions is so clearly like a VR thing. And I don't know, you'd have to feel it to see it, but it totally was something that's so obvious. And on one hand, I'm really glad that it obviously is playable, not in VR because I don't have PSVR, but on the other hand, like I would love to see what it looks like if I was face-to-face, because having that VR headset I think would be really, really awesome for this. So I hope to get one day and try this out, because this is instantly like along with Beat Saber, which I played before and it's tons of fun. Like this, Iron Man VR and Beat Saber are like the three I've got to try. PSVR one day. But yeah, it's a good game. I don't know how long I'll keep playing it, not because I don't want to, but because I think unless you're playing with like at least one other person online, it's kind of wouldn't be the greatest experience, just because of the amount of teamwork. Right.
It's not really set up for a single player kind of game. Like the majority of the content is online.
I would imagine this will be the kind of game where it'll have a dedicated but smaller player base, and it'll be really hard for new players to get into after a while, because those that stick around will become like dead-eye aces.
The learning curve is quite steep.
It's not inviting to new players unless you were like on the ground floor like me, like right when it came out. So that's just my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, because I'd love to keep playing it. I hope I have some more friends that get it. If you want to play with me, hit me up on Twitter. It's on the description of the show. But yeah, that's Star Wars. I really like it. Probably like a top 5 or 6 game of the year for me so far, but we'll maybe talk about that at the end of the year. Anyway, what have you been playing?
Well, that's awesome. I've been playing quite different games. I'm back into Bloodborne, as I tend to fall into every now and again.
We were just talking before the show, and it's kind of interesting how often Bloodborne gets brought up, but you've yet to ever actually talk about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, no, that's not true. You did speak about it when you're doing the team. You're doing a 2-player run at one point, I think you mentioned.
Right. I think I did. Or was that on? I've forgotten now. We did some practice episodes before just to make sure our equipment and everything was set up properly. And I can't remember if I talked about them on kind of a fake practice episode or if I've actually spoken about it on the show. But it comes up from time to time. I mean, I'm sure I'm garnering a bit of a reputation that like, this is my jam. So I've been playing that. It's really interesting. I won't get into it too much because I think maybe I'll save it for if we do a special episode.
I think it's in the works at some point.
Or for when I finish my platinum of the game and kind of, wash my hands of it, for a week before I start to crave it again. But it is cool. We're doing a magic run this time. Okay. So there's a magic in the game. There's some weapons that just use like a magic scaling, and then there's also some spells. It's not a huge portion of the game. It's sort of kind of like a niche way to play. But it's really interesting because it's encouraging a very different play style than what I typically tend to gravitate towards. So it's been very rewarding and fun to kind of approach the game in a different way, especially since I'm so familiar with it now. So maybe we'll get into that later, but I'm having the best time playing Bloodborne, which is very good because the other game I've been playing was my PS Plus choice for the month, which I was actually quite looking forward to. And it has not been the best experience. So if you don't remember, the game I picked was Vampyr, and it's vampire with a Y, which is just the edgiest way to spell it. And I think before I talk about it, I want to give you a nice preview of kind of the atmosphere of the game. So this is a quote from the opening cutscene that kind of sets the tone. And just go back to your emo goth days of middle school here, because what is darkness but lurking sun? What is wall but enslaved stone? What is glass but tortured sand?
Jesus.
What is hate but jilted love? And what is life but death pending?
My God, this is like some Blink-182 lyrics or something.
Absolutely. It's so edgy. But this game is a huge, like a really like dedicated niche following. And I can sort of understand why, because on paper, it's a great game. It has a lot of potential. But it just falls really short in terms of like how the game's actually presented and the gameplay itself. So it's a cool idea. You're a doctor turned into a vampire. And despite the game being called Vampyr with a Y, vampire is spelled normally throughout the entire game. So that's just a cool little
edge. What a letdown. Hey?
Yeah, it's such a cool little edge detail they put in, but it doesn't matter. And you're kind of like investigating the vampire epidemic and like how you turned into one. So it's a neat plot hook. And the game is centered around like two main mechanics of being like one half is combat and one half is sort of like this detective dialogue heavy like exploration mystery sort of stuff.
I mean, knowing very little about this game, I took it to be similar along the lines of like a Mass Effect type deal where half the game is in the missions and the other half is more like conversation, maybe not the detectives, not the same stuff, but like, the conversation kind of management of
it honestly is kind of, that's actually like a good comparison because the mystery isn't really like, it's not like something like Phoenix Wright or Danganronpa where you like get your evidence and then you have to come at like some kind of trial and like figure out how to use your evidence. You're basically just like talking to characters, and then there's like hidden dialogue options that you don't have access to. But if you talk to someone else who gives you that, then you now have your dialogue option unlocked. But like, if you don't have it, it's just like a grayed out option you're not allowed to select. So it's there, and it's just kind of like more like collecting information than actually having to like think about it yourself. And like,
there's nothing to put together. You just have to wait until you do something that unlocks that option,
exactly. Right? So that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but it's not a detective game in the sense of like one of like the visual novel style detective games. But kind of the interesting draw it has is that every NPC you meet can give you that valuable information, like those extra dialogue options or like just interesting like quest relevant stuff. But you also have the option to kill and like feed on all your NPCs because you're a vampire. and that gives you like extra XP that you can use to buy like new vampire skills, which kind of like influences the combat.
It's like you can suck that blood even harder.
Yes, absolutely. But like, it's a cool idea. It's an interesting idea for the system where like, okay, like, do you like, how engaged are you with your NPCs? Like, is this one, do you want more resources, or like, do you want to kind of like progress the story more? Are you attached to any of them? And it's a good idea, but it ultimately just feels very shallow, because at least for me, and like playing on normal difficulty, I didn't feel like there was any reason to care about the rewards from feeding. They just give you extra combat stats and XP when like you get that anyway to a degree, and like it doesn't really seem like there's anything that valuable to spend it on.
Yeah, I guess maybe in the late game you need more points.
Maybe in the late game, or maybe there is a harder difficulty I don't think was available on launch, but is there now? So maybe it's more useful to have better combat stats and levels.
I would imagine
for
so,
that.
But yeah.
I would hope so, but this kind of brings me to the combat, and to get it out of the way, it sucks. The
just
combat
bluntly.
just feels bad. Like, it's the pseudo soul style where you have your health and stamina bar, you lock on, you got your basic attack combo, special attack depending on what weapon you're using, you got to dodge. And then in addition to that, you have a special vampire move. So those are the ones you unlock with your XP. And you have like a third resource bar that's your like blood bar. And it fills up when you like feed on enemies during a fight. And then you use that as a resource for each like special vampire move costs a certain amount of blood. So again, it's like a really good idea on paper, but it isn't fun.
It's the kind of thing that would suck you in and be like, wow, this game sounds like the kind of systems that I want to engage with.
Yeah.
And then it's just too bad that it isn't implemented.
Yeah, exactly. Well. Like I don't feel ever like encouraged to use it. So, like all the fights I've done so far, just, generic fights and bosses, and it's still relatively early, but the AI is it's unintelligent, and it just repeats the same basic attacks over and over again, regardless of what you're doing. So it doesn't really feel like you need to strategize or approach any fight differently than a previous fight. Your character doesn't feel like there's a responsive weight to any of your attacks, and all of your attacks have like amazing zoom tracking, so you like slide across the arena when you go to hit an enemy, and like so you don't feel like you need to position smartly in a fight. The blood moves are visually quite cool, and I want them to be exciting, but they just feel like a strong finishing move that ends combat really quickly.
That's really too bad. I know, because you're coming off playing God of War as well, which is exactly. Like the total opposite in terms of how the fights feel and how satisfying it is to pull off.
Yeah, exactly. Like you compare throwing your Leviathan axe to like one of these punches, and it's like I don't feel like I'm participating really. And the other letdown I have is like the blood mechanic is cool because you have to feed in the middle of fights to like replenish your blood. And I feel like that could have been a really interesting risk reward where like you want to feed, but it's like a dangerous thing to do. It leaves you very vulnerable while you're like, stopping for a snack. But the other enemies, they just sort of like realize, oh, you're hungry? Like I'll politely wait for you to finish. So like they don't attack you if you're eating their friend in front of them. In the middle
probably
of
too frightened. They're like, oh shit, I don't want that to be me.
Oh, sure. Like maybe I'll have my lunch too while we're waiting. And like, so there's no kind of like,
anyone
deterrent or can someone open my yogurt for me? So like and like there's no deterrent to like strategize that. It's just like, oh, I'm out of blood, okay, great, I have more now, and like I'll use my strong move, okay, perfect, oh, I'm out of blood again, like rinse, repeat.
That's a shame because it reminds me of Hollow Knight, where you have to really be strategic about when you're healing because it takes time, right?
Yes,
when you stand
absolutely.
still, whereas that's the kind of thing I would have expected to be this mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example because in Hollow Knight to heal you use a resource, but you still have to stand still and it takes time.
Yeah, and it's risk reward.
So like risk reward, if you get hit by it, it's awful, and you need to find like smart times to pause from combat where you're safe. But in this game, like, nope, just give me some iframes for like a minute while I sit and wait, and like, oh god, it's already slow and boring, and now I'm just sitting here like having my lunch. So
you have your lunch as the player while your vampire's drinking blood.
Exactly. Get some snacks if you're gonna play this game. So that's a combat, which is really, there's not really anything else worth saying about it. So that takes us to the second half, which is kind of like the dialogue, mystery, exploration. And I think this is what draws in a lot of players because they get immersed in the world, and I can really see it having an interesting story. But again, there's that but tacked on, and it's this slow build, and I'm so pulled out of the game before it gets the chance to really hook me that I can't be interested about any of the characters or my own character or what's going on. Like, the voice acting is fantastic. I will say it's very good, except for the main character.
Oh, the worst.
So his quality is quite nice. It's a good voice actor, but the direction is so weird. The tone shifts so dramatically that it's really hard to take him seriously with anything he says or does. And he also never stops talking. And like, this is going to sound like an exaggeration, but the dude just doesn't shut up. Like, the game has that kind of system where he like comments on everything. So as you're moving around, he'll like make a comment on the environment or like say what he's feeling.
Is it because you don't really have a sidekick? So he, instead of being able to bounce, banter off of one another characters, you're more so like he has to narrate?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's supposed to be like a very narrative driven game. So it has him maybe like you're inside of his head more and getting all of his thoughts, exactly what he's feeling. But it's just way too much. Like, when I played the tutorial of this game, the first like half hour, I was legitimately laughing because like you're running around town looking for a place to hide because you just like cutscene murdered someone. And like there's literally like no more than a second pause in between dialogue. So he's running around going, "What's going on? Oh, I need to find somewhere safe. Oh God, like I'm in danger." And he just doesn't stop. It's like, dude, just chill out for a second. But then you'll come across things you can interact with. And like those clearly had lines that were recorded like separate and get used like without caring about the context throughout the game.
Yeah, it's not like they recorded different takes of him being exasperated or like surprised.
Yeah, exactly. So like within this tutorial section, while he's freaking out nonstop, you get to like a locked door and you go to interact with it and you can't get through. And he gives you the most deadpan, "This door is locked."
Yeah.
And then immediately goes back to like, "I need shelter." It's like, oh my God. It's really jarring, so that it made the game like funny instead of being like impactful in any way.
I'm assuming it's supposed to be quite dark and serious,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's supposed to be kind of like a dark, serious, gritty, and I'm just like, I can't get over how ridiculous my character is, and it's just such an unfortunate and weird choice. And like the game is it's really inconsistent with how it wants you to view things. Like, I was playing last night because I wanted to get a little bit more experience with the game before talking about it, and I get to a building and I'm outside of it, and Jonathan, the main character, starts talking. He's like, "Oh, I can smell blood everywhere. Like, oh, it smells so much like blood, like so strong." And then you get in the building and one of his like repeating cycles of dialogue is like, "Oh my God, there's blood everywhere." It's like, I know. Yeah, you were the one that told me there was going to be a lot of blood here.
That seems so inconsistent.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that's like the core of why the game fails for me. It doesn't feel cohesive or like it's a real world and there's any kind of like cause and effect going on with any of the characters. So like another example is like with the blood mechanic and feeding on your NPCs, it makes it a big deal. Like, are you going to eat your NPCs or are you not? Like, are you going to be a vampire? Are you going to be like a Twilight vegan vampire that like doesn't eat anyone? But then throughout combat, you're feeding all the time on the enemies. And it's like, it doesn't take that into the consideration of like where your morality is.
It's like that mechanic I mentioned on the last show, like how Nathan Drake can kill 45 guys and then have a struggle killing the boss. It's just inconsistent.
It's exactly like that. And it takes away the importance or the value of making those story decisions. Because like, well, I've already killed like hundreds of people. And like another good example, just I thought was interesting was in kind of one of the tutorial sort of sections, it teaches you like how you can lead away victims to eat them. This is for the NPCs. So it does this on kind of like a scripted sequence where you take this NPC and he's been injured. He wants to go to the hospital. So you're like, "Oh, perfect. I will take you to the hospital. Come with me." And you like lead him into this sort of like
what's going to go down in a secluded area.
And so the game pops up with like a tooltip. It's like you can either eat him or release him. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to try to do the good stuff because like I don't want to invest in the combat. So like I released him and then so nothing happened. Effectively, like we walked like for like 30 steps on my way to showing him the hospital, which like I'm a doctor at. So presumably I was actually going to take him. And so I release him and then he just kind of forgot he was injured and needed to go to the hospital and he just sat down and is chilling. And I'm like, "Oh, wow. Like, are you okay now, sir?" Like,
I would be fascinated to do some research on the development of this game and kind of if it went through any struggles, or like did the narrative director leave?
Yeah, it almost feels like each kind of team worked separately and then didn't really like.
It's like they've got the pieces to put something really cool together, but it just didn't form.
It's just so close to being like an interesting game, and on paper it's got all these things that stand out and kind of almost make it a unique or interesting experience, but then it just feels so fake, and nothing feels like it has a real like consequence. And with the main draw being like interacting with these characters and like, you know, playing out like what kind of vampire you're gonna be, like they don't feel like they have any weight to any of the decisions you make. And like it's just so inconsistent. Like the game has you like at the start, there's all these people like chasing you down because they know you're a vampire and trying to break into your house and kill you. And then your first main quest is to go to you need to get information, so you go to the local bar to ask people for information on like who's been by lately, and none of them know you're a vampire. So it's just like, oh, it would be inconvenient if they knew, but everyone else seems to know to fight you, and it's a mess, man. Yeah, it's just a mess. Like maybe it gets really good later, but at this point it's just I don't have any passion to see where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
So
well, let me tell you, on my PS Plus game, I kind of feel the same way.
Yes. I definitely want to hear about that, but there's two other things I just think are really interesting about it.
I'm not trying to cut you off.
But I got to call out that the cursor in the menus, which it controls like a mouse, so you move the stick like you would a mouse on the screen instead of like D-pad to buttons.
It's like Destiny.
Yeah, which I don't like on a console. It's just it doesn't feel
it feels lazy
natural.
to me. It feels like this was made for PC, so we're gonna just make it for PC.
Exactly. But it also has the cursor animation is the exact same animation as when something's loading. It's like this red circle that spins, and it literally not only does it look like a loading animation, it literally is the loading animation that'll pop up in the corner when something's loading. So when I first started the game, I was like, okay, great, like the menu's loading, and I'm like sitting there, I'm like, this is kind of taking a while, and I'm like trying to use the D-pad to like, you know, like swap options, which doesn't work in the menus. I'm like, oh, this is taking a long time.
Just sitting there staring at the menu screen.
There, like, oh, that's my cursor. Like, oh shit. But yeah, I mean, I think this game I would have enjoyed in like, I equated it feels a lot like playing like vanilla Skyrim, which came out in 2011, and it feels like that sort of like we have interesting ideas, but we haven't really progressed enough to like get to a point where we can do those seamlessly or like integrate them to like really like extreme niches and like in a very good way, because it's like, you know, like these are new systems in games. But I was shocked to find out this game came out in 2018. Yeah, so right. Like it's quite new, but it feels very much like playing like a game I would have maybe played in 2011 in school without having like tons of experience of newer games. So yeah, I guess if I don't know, I almost want to recommend it. I think it's really interesting, and like I almost want to play more just because it's an interesting thing to look at, like how close it is to being good and where it went wrong. But I really can't recommend this game to anyone.
That sounds hilarious, though. Maybe you play it for the comedy factor.
Yeah, honestly, like, sit down with like a group of friends, couch co-op, pass the controller around, and just make fun of like your dumbass character, and like, oh no, I need shelter. Like, it's like he has amnesia and he just forgets what's going on every like 2 seconds, and then is like surprised by what's happening. But yeah, that was my PS Plus. So,
well, like I alluded to. You know what's funny about this is I've been through such a roller coaster with my PS Plus game. Of course, Need for Speed Payback is what I got. So I honestly thought like you were going to be very lucky to get Vampyre. Not that, and if you remember, I actually wanted Need for Speed because at the time we picked these, I was playing a little bit of Burnout Paradise, which I was really into, especially when it came out originally on the 360.
Right.
And then I was kind of just diving back in. So I was like, oh, I'm up for a racing game. Like, why not try out in Need for Speed?
Yeah. Payback. I was pleasantly surprised, much to my misfortune.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you got super lucky. This game has been a roller coaster. I turned it on the first time, sat down and played, and I really had a good time. Like, the driving was pretty good. You know, I'm not a huge driving enthusiast, but it seemed fun. Like, it's close enough to Burnout, which is my preference, that I was enjoying it. You know, played it for the first night, had a good time, shut it off, and I came back to it a couple more times, and every time I've booted the game up, I've had less and less enjoyment and more like, this isn't it. kind of feeling. So, and it kind of culminated. I had a couple friends over the other night and they were like, oh, show us the game. Like, just let's see it. And I turned it on and I was just like, I'm almost like, just like having secondhand embarrassment in a way.
Right. It's like when you show someone a video and like they're not laughing, you're like, oh my God, like I swear this was funny, but now this is the worst thing I've ever seen.
It's just like that. So yeah, what can I say? Like this game is basically Fast and Furious for those in like video game form. So for people that like that kind of like cheesy, over the top, like almost cringy in a way because they're trying to be like so cool. They're like, oh yeah, look at this jump. Yeah, bro. Like nice one. Like those people are going to feel really at home if you can take it for what it is. But for me, it just was a bit of a turnoff. Maybe I'm no fun. I don't know. But there's a couple things like this game really has. And that's one thing I appreciate about Burnout is not to compare them over and over again, but it doesn't have like that car fetishism that a lot of driving games seem to have. Like in Burnout, you're just playing the game. In this game, it's like you'll hear you got on your controller on the speaker on the DualShock. It's got like police sirens you can kind of hear, or police radios, so you can hear like, oh, he's turning down 5th Street, like, and you can kind of hear that. But it's a really cool addition. But what I really don't like is just the amount, like I said, that they like can't help but salivating at how cool these cars are. Like the police scanner will be like, we've got a 2001 Nissan GT, like, and they'll list like all the specs of this car and like the color, and it's just like, I don't give a fuck like about Nissan Skylines and
they're
stuff.
Like flexing like I know these cars.
And it's like for those kind of people, I'm sure that's really cool, and like it's what they're into, right? There's tons of car enthusiasts and stuff. That's just not me. I'm just there for the fun driving. So that just is a bit of a turn off because it doesn't do much. But the driving, I said, is pretty fun. Like you're drifting around. There's a lot of emphasis on off-road and like kind of stuff like that. So there's actually a story, which is kind of like a heist thing. Like you're this main guy. His name's Tyler. He's a generic white guy, and he's got a crew of 3 people that they do heists and missions, and they're like in their early to mid 20s, and apparently they can drive around, get into car accidents, probably murdering people, and they just get away with it. And this is their lifestyle, right? So it's Tyler, the white guy. Then there's a white girl, and then there's a black guy.
Okay, good. You got your diversity.
You have to have the diversity. Sure. The black guy is also English. Which is another diversity.
I hope one of them better be in a wheelchair. Otherwise, I'm out.
I mean, I put some people in wheelchairs by getting in car accidents, but I mean, I'm all for the diversity. Obviously, like make things realistic, right? There's all types of people in the world. Like that's a great thing, but it's just done so stereotypically, right? Like in this kind of way. It's like a blockbuster movie, right? It's gonna always have the same kind of tropes, and this is very tropey. And the hilariously cheesy villain also, like, you're gonna get this car back for me, it's stolen in a race. Like, if I don't get this car back, there's gonna be people after me. Like, how can these cars be so important to like your multi-million-dollar hotel business that you need me to get this sports car back? Like, it's worth $1 million. Sure, you're probably like a billionaire. Like, shut up.
But didn't you hear it was a GT75 gray?
See, now it's like you played some Need for Speed. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I mean, the story is what it is, but it's kind of in some ways a good evolution of what Burnout Paradise was, because Burnout Paradise was kind of on this island, and it's not an open world per se, but it's very much like you can drive around this city's environment, and when you come to certain places you can do races or trick runs where you got to go off jumps and score points, stuff like that. And this game is a lot like that too. Like, you're in an open space and there's like speed cameras you can drive by, and you got to hit a certain speed on. It's like a high score thing. So you got to get to like a certain mileage per hour to get a star on that, or you go off jumps to hit through billboards. And there's a lot of stuff littered around the world that make it pretty fun to be driving around from point A to point B. And there's also like different factions that you can go up against. So there's there's the races on the road, like, and you're going against different driving crews to try and work your way up this ladder to get in this prestigious race to win this car back for the guys, like kind of the story. But you got to start at the bottom, and so you're in these like monotonous little street races before you get into the bigger time stuff. But there's also races where you're off-roads, you're taking like Jeeps and bigger vehicles, and kind of you're driving through mountains and like rocky terrain. So it kind of has some nice variety. In terms of not just being the same type of race over and over again. And one other thing that I like a lot about it too is that each race has like a leaderboard functionality, which is, I'm not like a high score person. I don't really care too much about going to check the leaderboards, but what this game makes it really accessible to do so. I think I had like 3 or 4 friends on my PlayStation friends list that have played this game before, and just by hovering over the race in like the mission select mode, I can see their high scores like right there on the screen, and that actually was kind of enticing to me if I was to get into this.
Right.
Where unlike a lot of games, you know, where you need to like go into a separate menu and like tab over, and then you see the global leaderboard list, and then you got to tab over to like your friends list, and it's the kind of thing that they make it such a hidden little section to where it never really means too much.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't go searching for it, but it's a nice quality of life. Just be like, oh, interesting. Like John played that game. Like, oh, cool. Good
I actually was surprised how interesting I found that, because I was like, well, my score is pretty close. Like it could see myself getting a little bit more into it with a game like this just by the fact that you can see so easily how other people have done.
I like that. It's kind of like I never go onto my like actual PlayStation feed and like scroll down and see like what all my friends are doing. But when I sign on and there's like the top 2, like James just got this trophy or like something that I can see, I was like, oh, cool. Like that's interesting.
Yeah.
And like,
it's kind of like that. It just puts it in your face a little bit more in a non-obnoxious way. So I like that. And there's good customization too. Like by winning races, you win little cards that can upgrade different aspects of your car. So you could say like your acceleration, turning, like all the things you can imagine. It's done by cards, so it's a little bit more inviting than just giving me a menu and letting me tune all these different aspects, because I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't know like what the different muffler will do for my car, like a different you know.
And there's 50 mufflers. To choose
exactly.
from.
But with this, you kind of just it's presented in a way that's you don't have to have that knowledge about cars. So I appreciate that. That being said, there's a lot of emphasis on like upgrades, and you can stance your wheels so they can angle outwards like those people do with their $500 Civics that they put like $3,000 of upgrades and a spoiler on. So you can do that kind of thing. But I mean, if you're a big car person and you don't mind a bit of a cheesy storyline, I think this is actually a good game. And I'm making a bit of fun of it by saying I had a bad experience. Like, it's not bad in any way.
Right. It's just not your thing.
It's just not my thing. And after a few hours of driving around doing some races and missions, I'm out.
Okay.
But it's pretty good. And I think, judging by what you had to say, I had better experience than you.
I think so. I think you won October. Congratulations.
We should keep track. But that's what we've been playing for the week. So let's take a break, Kate, and we will be right back with some news right after this. Okay, guys, we are back for the second segment, and that means it's time to talk about some news. There's been a few little PlayStation stories coming out the last little while, and the first one is that trophies are being changed. Can you believe it? They're not taking them away or anything, but they're making some changes and basically expanding how the trophy system works. So before, I think you caps off, you earn trophies in every game, obviously, and it combines to like your trophy score on your PlayStation profile.
Yeah.
Which is now being expanded up to, it used to go, I think, to level 99, and now it's going up to level 999. So they're adding like a shitload of new levels.
Added an extra 9.
They're kind of scaling you up. So I think I was level like 13 or 14 before, and now I'm like in the late 200s.
Right.
Which is kind of like, wow, that's like weird to see. But yeah, they're basically just upgrading it. I don't know if it's because they're expanding, like, hey, you know, people have had their PSN profile since the PS3 days. Like maybe some people are getting towards like the later sections of like what the trophy levels are, so they thought they'd broaden it, but I'm not really too sure if it's not going to make much of a difference overall. But they're changing it to be like, okay, well, level 1 to 299 is bronze, then it's silver from 300 to 599, gold from 600 to 998, and then you get a platinum trophy, I guess, for your rank,
right,
if you make it to 999. But
right, the very last level.
Yeah, I mean, do you care much about this? I mean,
I'm not a huge trophy person. I mean, I always enjoy like, ooh, little dopamine rush when it pops up, you got a trophy. I like that, and I am, you know, like attempting to do my first proper platinum right now, which is kind of cool.
Bloodborne.
But I'm not a big trophy person, so it doesn't really personally like affect how I'm gonna play, but I think it's definitely cool. Like I know a lot of people who really like that completionist sort of thing, so it just gives them a little bit more to go for.
Yeah, it expands. It expands, like, for those people, I guess. I'm similar to you. I think I'm a little bit more into trophies than you, but I still don't consider myself like a platinum hunter or anything like that.
Yeah, the one detail I quite like that they mentioned is that the platinum trophies are going to be worth more than other trophies. Yeah. So, like, I kind of like that because it's sort of like a nice reward for having, like, fully completed a game. You get, like, a bigger boost than just getting, like, a bronze trophy or something in a game that you get for just, like, you beat the first boss. Good work.
I totally agree. I've always wanted them to implement some kind of system where you get, I don't know if it's like a small store credit or something, or for getting trophies in games or something. Like, if you get the platinum, imagine if they're like, well, here's a, even 5% off coupon to, like, your next purchase on the PlayStation Store. Like, I always thought that would be so cool.
That would be cool. Honestly, like, I would probably start platinuming or, like, trying more, not because I'm like, oh, like, I'm cheap and, like, 5% off, like, yeah, saved a few dollars, but, like, it's just like incentive. A fun incentive is, like, kind of what drives me to do things a little bit more. So, like, it'd be cooler even if you got, like, a banner to put on your thing, or, like, here's a player icon. You get, like, a cool, like, Bloodborne icon because you platinum Bloodborne that only you can have. And,
like, that would be awesome, because a lot of games do that, like, internally, where you'll rank up, you can put, like, a different banner or frame around, like, your name in like Rocket League or Call of Duty or something.
I'm thinking of any kind of, like, game that's got, like, an online, like, ranked system or something where you, like, level up characters, then all of a sudden, like, oh, you get the skin because you made it to level 15 with this character, and, like, those things always feel really good because it isn't just like, I paid for this, it's I earned this.
Yeah, so maybe they could incorporate something like that. I mean, it's just a guess. Like, you never know what they'll do, I guess, expanding it forward, but just a little change for you.
Yeah, it's a cute little story for anyone who's into that kind of thing. The next story we've got is we've gotten the final details for the PS5 backwards compatibility. So I think before this, they'd mentioned that, the vast majority of games will be playable. Don't panic.
But they didn't give any, like, concrete details. They were just saying, like, we expect everything to be playable, or they didn't even say, like, at launch, and people were kind of worried about, like, what is the timeline for this? Like, which games are and are not going to work? And we've got some pretty positive news about this.
So this is fantastic news. So according to an article on the 9th, we've got Sony, more than 99% of PS4 library games are going to be available on PS5, and they've listed, I believe, 10 games that are not playable, and everything else is going to work great. So the list is really interesting. I encourage everyone to kind of, like, make note and let us know not only how many of these games you've ever heard of, but how many of these games you've actually played. So I'll read through them. The first one is Afro Samurai 2, Revenge of Kuma, Volume 1. The next game is DWVR, which I don't even know what that stands for.
Who knows?
There's Hitman Go, Definitive Edition, Joe's Diner, Just Deal With It, Robinson, The Journey, Shadow Complex Remastered, Shadwin, TT Isle of Man, Ride on the Edge 2, and finally, perhaps the most devastating, We Sing.
Listen, all I gotta say is all the Joe's Diner fans out there must be furious.
Right? They're gonna just have to deal with it.
It's like they included that one on purpose.
That's right. So they haven't really specified why these 10 games don't work in comparison to the others. So
I was kind of thinking about that too, and I wonder if it's just maybe it's on the developer to do some kind of port or upgrade on their end to make the games compatible, or otherwise I don't know why this is kind of an arbitrary list as far as, like, what made these specifically the games that PlayStation didn't care about to upgrade, or maybe there's something going on, like, behind the scenes, I guess. But overall, I think this is extremely positive news, saying that, with the exception of these 10 games, which are not even really are very big titles at all, like, just everything's going to work. That's fantastic news.
Yeah, I think so. And it makes sense that it's maybe on the developers, because they specify later in the article as well that, like, for carrying over saves and, like, previously played content, like,
yeah, well, that's a whole other beast though.
Yeah, but they say, like, that's also developer dependent. So while these PlayStation 4 games will work on your PS5, it's up to developer to, like, if you can just, like, pick up your save halfway through and keep playing. That's not something that PlayStation, I guess, is saying that they have direct control over.
Yeah.
And it's going to be developer dependent.
Yeah. Well, to me, the interesting part of this is not so much the games that are going to work. I'm more interested to know, like, which ones are going to have some kind of boost for for the next gen, because I know they mentioned this game boost feature, which is, some titles have better frame rates or 4K resolutions or increased graphical fidelity and whatnot, but they don't really say which games will have that. So I'm kind of just wondering, like, I'm sure most of the first party, like PlayStation Studios games will get that.
The two that they've commented on saying that they do include this are The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, which are obviously the two recent,
newest
like,
ones, right?
biggest games.
But I mean, like, for you, like, are you going to get to go back and play, Bloodborne in 60 frames per second? Spoiler warning for our third story. But I mean, so if someone buys Persona 5, like, if I'm recommending that, are they going to get to play that with the boost, or are they just basically playing the PS4 version on a different PS5 console?
Exactly. It will be interesting. I think my biggest thing, especially coincidentally because of Bloodborne, is like load times will be quicker. So
that's the main thing, right?
That's the main thing for Bloodborne as well. But I mean, it's just going to be exciting to play on the PS5, and even if it doesn't like translate into the game being different, I think it'll still kind of feel like an upgrade being on the new hardware. But I don't know. I'm happy personally just being able to play all of the games and having backwards compatibility. If it's boosted in some way, that's a bonus. If not, well, at least I just have everything on one console.
Yeah, and you've not lost anything too, right? That's the main thing. Like, we're not losing the ability to play these, which is great. Positive news. I'm just glad that this isn't, because it could have been such a disaster if they were like, well, we have 15 games that are going to work at launch and more will come at a TB announced date. Like, that would be terrible, like, as far as publicity and even just like people wanting to buy the new system but continue to play their backlog and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It really, and even with them releasing, like, here's some free PS Plus games for PS4,
the PS Plus
like
collection,
the PS Plus collection. I think they've really made sure, like, we have a great library, like, to buy your PS5. Like, you're not gonna buy it, play one game, like, okay, what now? Like, it really is. It really is very much like, okay, upgrade your whole system and enjoy everything you're doing, but now it's on a PS5.
Exactly. And Kate, have no fear, because our third news story today is one that's going to be very happy news for you, is that there's a Bloodborne modder, and his name is Lance McDonald, and he apparently has been working on a Bloodborne mod that lets the game run at 60 frames per second. So this is, it's just a fun little story I honestly threw in because I heard this the other day and I thought of you instantly. And basically he has a modded version of Bloodborne, from what I understand, that actually runs at 60 frames per second, and he had to do a bunch of tweaking because it's not as simple as just speeding the game up. It had like some effects on like the elevators and different aspects of the game that you had to like go in and manually change the code for. So that exists, but I guess what he had said is that he's not actually going to release it unless Sony doesn't release their own upgraded version of Bloodborne. So I think that's really respectful of like, FromSoft and everything, but I just hope first of all, I hope there's like an official release for this, because you have to mod your system, I think, also to play like the upgraded version, at least if you're playing on PS4. If you're playing on PC, I'm sure it works fine. But either way, it looks like you're going to get Bloodborne upgraded. Yeah,
I heard, and his name was Lance. So Lance, like, may the good blood guide your way. I think that's wonderful. And it's so wholesome. Yeah, the detail that he's like, gonna wait and see if when it comes to PS5, if it's gonna have that upgrade just inherently anyway. So I like that he's not doing it for like,
well, it's such a different story, right? Because so often these things would just come out, people would try to, release it, get out there in the wild, and then, sometimes they have these lawsuits after them and they have to take the game down. Like, I'm thinking of, there was a Metroid 2 remake or something that someone had made, and they got tons of flack. Nintendo is really stickler for mods and that kind of thing, I guess, more than other companies. But even still, like, it's just nice to see him doing it respectfully, I guess.
Yeah, it's really wholesome. It's like, I hope everyone gets to experience this. So if this is the only way, then I will help. If not, like, awesome, we did it. So that's wonderful. I mean, spoiler, big surprise, I'm going to be playing Bloodborne on PS5 when it comes out. So if I play with his update, or if I play with Sony's, it's happening.
Shout out to you, Lance. We love you. Anyways, Kate, I think we'll take a break right there. And why don't we take a few minutes, collect our breath, think about some more Bloodborne, and we'll be back to talk about our favorite boss fights. Will Bloodborne show up? Who knows? I actually don't know. Is it on your list? We'll find out. Give us a break. We'll see you in a few seconds. Hey guys, welcome back. We are here for the final part of the show where we're going to be talking about our favorite bosses in video games. And you know what inspired me to think about this topic actually was, last time we were talking about game mechanics that we dislike. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'd said was, I hate it when bosses, use different mechanics than what you've been using the rest of the game, or just seem like a tacked on thing at the end that doesn't really relate mechanically to what you've been doing, or thematically, like like BioShock had at the end there and whatnot. So it just sparked me to thinking, like, what are my favorite bosses in games, and we had a bit of a discussion about some of those before, but I'd like to get your thoughts, and also just see if Bloodborne can finally make an appearance in not only the first segment, but also the second and third segments of the same show. So let's see. You want to start us off?
Yeah, I think we might as well. I'm not even going to bother hiding it. The first thing that came to my mind, and the first thing I wrote down when you brought this up, is our good old friend, Father Gascoigne from Bloodborne. To no one's surprise. But specifically why I picked good old Papa G.
Papa G?
As I like to call him. He's a second boss in Bloodborne. And while he's still high on my list, but he's not my favorite. But he is the moment in the game where it just sort of clicked for me, and I fell in love with not only Bloodborne, but the entire genre of these kind of FromSoft games. So he's going to be here as my stand-in representative for, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Sekiro, all of them. Especially since Bloodborne was my favorite one, and I just loved it. Like, the hunter fights in that game are some of my favorite parts because they're just an intense 1v1 with characters who kind of follow the same rules that you do as a player. And they have the same kind of, they can dodge, they can parry, they've got, they use the exact same weapons that you have at your disposal as well. So he actually uses the hunter axe, which is one of the weapons you can start with.
That's what I started with.
Yeah, which is really cool. I didn't have it, unfortunately, but it's cool to kind of come up against him with okay, we got the same equipment. And so he's fantastic. The arena is awesome. It's littered, it's kind of like this area littered with a bunch of tombstones. So they can help you because you can sort of hide behind them and they can block his ranged gun attacks, but they can also hinder you because it's really easy to sort of back up into them when you're evading and
corner yourself.
And sort of get stuck. So you really need to use your environment to your advantage, or otherwise it's your detriment. So I like that aspect. I like as well, it's got a really good kind of lore integration with the game as well. It even is tied into one of the NPC quest lines, which I think off the top of my head, there's only one other boss in the game that is. And it even has a sort of I want to call it a puzzle. It's not really, but there's an item you can get in the game that has an effect in the fight. But it's not obvious unless, it's not a super complicated thing if you actually read it, but you do have to do a little bit of investigation and you read the item, figure out that it's related to Father Gascoigne.
Yeah, it's a nice little tidbit for someone that pays attention.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it just sort of embodies all of the things that I like about these kind of fights and the games, and it has an amazing transformation that is, and if you're not familiar with the genre, it's really shocking. Halfway through the fight, I won't spoil it in case you've never played.
You can talk about it. It's old enough.
Fine. He's the second boss, but once you get him to half health, he turns into this big werewolf from being a person, and he gets so aggressive, and it's terrifying almost when you're playing because you're so caught up in the moment, and he's got you on the back foot, you're still learning and getting familiar with the game, and now all of a sudden he's even harder and more aggressive. And it just
really throws you to the wolves. Oh my God. I might cut that out. We'll see.
No, it's staying. But yeah, Father Gascoigne just for me really embodies the moment I fell in love with this genre. And I was this is something special that I've never experienced in a different game. And I actually played him recently, going back because on a multiple second playthrough, and I was so excited to fight him again, and he's not even that hard.
I fucking kicked my ass on first fight, I'll tell you that.
Once you're good, and he's got big parry windows and stuff, and
he's easy when you go back after playing the game more, but when you first run into him, I think you got to be pretty good to get past him easily at the start.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of a nice skill check, but I wouldn't say he's my favorite boss. There's some where like I think they're better maybe mechanically or provide more of a challenge in certain ways. But I have like such a soft spot for him in my heart.
That's a good shout. I like that one. Mm-hmm. Gascoigne was actually the one I'd thought of for Bloodborne also, but I left it because I was like, you know what? I got enough I can talk about. I don't need to steal that from you.
So it was a safe bet.
It was, yeah. My first one I'll go with, they're not in any particular order or anything, but I'm going to go with a boss from Final Fantasy X, which is, I read up there, I guess, tied for my favorite Final Fantasy with the 7 remake. But I'm going with the Spectral Keeper from Final Fantasy X. So the reason I'm going with this one, I think, is it's a great example of a boss that takes the mechanics of a game that you're playing, like Final Fantasy X, obviously turn-based combat. One of the things I like so much about it is like you can switch your party members out on the fly in battle without taking a turn. So you're using your whole party without any penalty. So it builds upon that in this fight in the sense that this fight also has to do with positioning. So the fight takes place about, from what I remember, it's about maybe halfway, 2/3 through the game, and you're in this arena. It's just the same as any turn-based combat for a game, but with this boss. You also have to put your characters in different positions. So you're fighting the boss who's in the middle of the room. And if you can imagine, in a circle around, there's 6, I think it's either 6, maybe it's 6 or 8 panels around encircling the boss. And you can move your characters to any one of these 6 panels. Okay. And the boss will periodically attack different areas or different sections of the places where you can stand. So you're always not only choosing your moves and planning out your tactics as far as like which teammates you're going to swap in and like who you're going to buff, what spells you're going to use, but also you're thinking about like, well, I need to make sure I use this turn to move, Waka to this other panel because he's able to get smashed.
He's got to walk out of the other panel.
He's got to walk over there to not get smashed, his face smashed in, right? So it just kind of builds that one extra step on top of what the game's already doing in a great battle system, in my opinion, to make it a little bit more complicated just for this specific fight, and that the mechanic doesn't show up again. But the reason I like it is just because it makes this boss stand out so much.
Right, it's very unique.
And it's not like, you're not walking in there, you're like, oh, wait a second, like, why is this now a rhythm game? You're walking in there and you're saying like, wow, this is making me think that extra layer that was not there previously. Right. And I think that's just it's a really cool example. And also like the fight itself is neat. Like the environment is kind of like cosmic looking, and it just has a really nice aesthetic around it as well. So yeah, that's pretty much my first pick.
Okay. Interesting. I like it. What's really interesting is after you talking about, you kind of picked yours with mechanics in mind, I just had a realization that I think I pick a lot of mine. And what stands out to me is in terms of like how they're integrated into the like realism of the world and the immersion. Because the next one I've picked is a boss from Hollow Knight. It's the Mantis Lords. So I love Hollow Knight. It's another one of my favorite games. But I picked this fight not because, again, it's my favorite fight in the game mechanically, but because it's such an interesting fight and like it has a relation and consequence in the world after you beat them. So normally in this game, you walk into a boss arena and the fight just starts and, you're in the middle of the action. But with the Mantis Lords, you actually like fall into their boss arena and you have to walk up to them and like press a challenge prompt to begin the fight. And it's really neat. And it's the only one in the game, I believe, that has that integration. And what they're basically doing is there's an area of the map that they're blocking and you fight them. And basically when you win, you don't actually kill or defeat them. They sort of bow to you and then let you progress further.
So it's like they're just checking if you're like worthy, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And it's really interesting too because they're the Mantis Lords. There's Mantis enemies that are throughout the game in different areas, and specifically like leading up to this fight and afterwards. And normally they're just regular enemies that are hostile towards you. But after you defeat the Mantis Lords, they instead, when you get close, they bow to you, like to show you respect.
They're like, yeah, you kicked my ass.
Yeah.
you can pass.
Well, like they're like the underlings to this boss, basically. Like, so yeah, they bow to you, like you got the respect of this tribe. And if you attack them, they become hostile and fight you like regular enemies. But I just think it's such a cool like way that the world responds to you having fought this boss.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like, okay, cool, beat them, like on to the next area and like forget about it. So it's really cool. The fight itself is also really fun. Like it's kind of more of like a pattern boss where they have a few different moves that they use, and you sort of like learn how to deal with each one. But it's fast paced, it's fun, and the game has a mechanic too where you can come back later and re-challenge all the bosses on like a harder version. So the fight is fun just in general, and then the hard version is actually like quite intense. So
I need to play Hollow Knight, man.
You need to play Hollow Knight.
I really
like,
do.
The game is just it's beautiful. Like,
I've had so many people recommend and tell me to play.
Game.
Gotta do it.
But if you do, yeah, you should play it, and you should look out and anticipate the Mantis Lord fight.
Nice. So my next one is GLaDOS from Portal.
Consider
and
that one.
it's not so much a fight, so maybe it's a bit of a cheating, submission for this, but it's still the end of I consider GLaDOS a boss.
Yeah.
Another one where you're not gaining any new mechanics, or I really thought of it from this perspective, I guess. But I mean, Portal for me is, it's a puzzle game, but I like it just as much for the narrative of what it's going for. And I just think GLaDOS is such a funny character that I really enjoy almost just what she's saying to you while you're taking her out. So the way the boss works is that you're basically using portals to get turrets to shoot at GLaDOS for you, and then you're taking parts that fall off of her and disposing of them in the Aperture Science incinerator.
Yeah.
And she just gets progressively more broken down as you do so. So it's not maybe the most difficult boss encounter, but it's still, you're using the portals in a way that you hadn't necessarily used them a whole lot before. And just the dialogue that she has while she's getting broken down is so funny. I was watching clips of this before when I was preparing to talk about it, and just some of the things she says. She's like, with all this violent behavior, the only thing you've broken is my heart. Like in her weird robot voice. Or you have to incinerate her morality core, so that's one of the things that breaks off. And so she's like spreading this toxin, and she's like, just so you know, this toxin actually isn't dangerous, well, for me, but it is for you. And like she's just saying stuff like that. And you get the one of the things she says, she's like, you're not smart, you're not a doctor, you're not smart at all, like where did your life go wrong? And just like all these weird things she's like trying to taunt you, get in your head. And then of course the game ends afterwards. There's the Aperture Science song, there's the cake that shows up, and it's just a great finale. And of course everyone needs to remember the best line in the whole song, which is, Aperture Science, we do what we must because we can.
Absolutely. That song is so good. It's legitimately just in my library of music, and it comes on every now and again, and it always makes me smile.
Something about like that, usually that kind of, Alvin and the Chipmunks style voice is really annoying to me, but in that song, for whatever reason, it is great. So yeah, GLaDOS.
Absolutely. GLaDOS, yeah. I would say like it would be very easy to argue GLaDOS into like a top 10 best characters of all time in gaming. Like,
I would agree.
So memorable.
I agree completely. And it's funny because even the start of the game, GLaDOS isn't really that interesting. Like, you don't even realize it's a character other than just like giving you directions as to what to do in each of these rooms. And as you continue going, it's like things get fishy, and GLaDOS develops more of a personality. And
she
then
gets
by
progressively funnier. And
yeah, it's great.
That's awesome. I like that pick a lot. My last pick as well is one of those, maybe it's a little cheating, I don't know how much of a boss it is, but I picked from Divinity Original Sin 2, but I think it's something unique to playing co-op, but there are a couple instances in the game, and I won't spoil when they happen, but it is sort of like, almost like a competition that you're taking part in. And normally if you're playing single player, you would be the victor of the competition, or like, it's there's one spot available for whoever, wins the fight. And so it would just be your character. But when you're playing co-op, you kind of are both the main character. So there's a couple instances where you do the fight, and then it turns to you guys, it's like, okay, well now you have to fight each other to see who's the one that gets it. And it happened a couple times in the game, and it was so unexpected, especially the first time, and also the last time, which was in a slightly different context. So it was like, oh my God, like we have to fight now?
It's almost like your partner is the boss.
Yeah, and exactly. So like I played the whole game co-op with my boyfriend, and we're like, oh my God, like we have to fight each other. And so like I had my main character and then the secondary character in our party, because your party is of 4, so we both had a main and then a secondary character. So it was our like a 2v2, and like we both know exactly what the other person's build is, and like because we've been building our characters together to be like a party to cover all of our things. So like he had our healer, and his character's a damage dealer, and then my character's a damage dealer, and then I had our tank. So I was like, okay, like let's see if
you have a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, let's see if you can get through our tank. Like, so it was really cool. And then because it happened a couple times, it was sort of like we had it like how many times have you won versus how many times have I won kind of thing. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to use some items. And it's like, well, we've been saving those items for like a big like actual important fight. And it's like, well, if you're going to pull out your item, maybe I'll pull out my items. And like, it was like a fun, unexpected competition. So I put that on the list, not necessarily.
It's an interesting answer.
Yeah, like it was just such a different thing in a game that I'd never really encountered before. And it was such a memorable, I mean, that whole game was just basically like memorable experiences one after the other. But it just sort of stuck out as in like, I really liked that. And it made sense in the world. Like, okay, yeah, we can't both win this thing or both do this place where there's only one slot. But like, it was just a lot more fun and well integrated than just like, well, now you have to choose who's going to do it. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Well, my last one is going to be a bit of a spoiler for people that haven't played God of War 3. So just to let you guys know, I was going to pick one of the Baldur fights in the new God of War game, but just because we're going to be doing a spoiler cast on that sometime soon, I figured we'd leave. I'm sure we'll talk about it there. So
absolutely,
I ended up going back in time, back to God of War 3 to pick out.
I'm going to try to guess.
Okay.
I want to try and guess.
You get one chance.
Is it Poseidon?
It's not Poseidon. No.
Okay, that was a good one.
I picked Hercules.
Oh, okay.
I really like the Hercules fight. And again, it's another one of those that uses the mechanics of the game, but expands on them. So for those that haven't played the game, Hercules to me is such a funny character because God of War plays with scale a lot. Like you'll either be fighting guys of your own size or you'll be fighting like gigantic, creatures that Kratos is like the size of their hand, and you're
like scaling
very, very
them.
small. But Hercules is kind of somewhere in the middle because he's kind of like what Hagrid is to Harry Potter. He's like a giant, but not like obscenely huge. And so this fight just has so many good moments to me. Like the two of them are talking before they kind of go into the arena because Hercules is almost challenging Kratos, and they have one of those almost, like in UFC or MMA, they line up for the weigh-in and they're just standing across from each other.
Yes, they do.
And Kratos is just like death staring this guy, so confident, but he's like so small compared to this gigantic guy he has to go fight. So that was pretty funny. But the fight starts off, you're kind of in this arena taking out Hercules' minions and obviously giving them the business. Then he comes down and he has the weapons that he's got, which are he has
the gauntlets, right?
The Nemean
like
cestus, the
Nemean
Nemean cestus. I can never remember the name of that because like, what are cestus? What is a Nemean anyway? So he puts those on. They're just like big. They're almost like boxing gloves, but they're metal and look like lions or some kind of mythical creature. And he comes down. And he's obviously a very strong character. He's Hercules. So you got to watch out. It's a match of titans, really, Kratos and him. And so eventually the minions leave. It's one-on-one, and you're fighting him like you would a normal enemy. There's no, there is differences, but he's basically just like a challenging fight. Kind of like, not like a hunter in Bloodborne, but very much like, he's got a similar kind of skill set. It's kind of like a mini
boss sort of idea.
So you fight him, and then eventually his armor starts falling off, and then in typical God of War fashion, it has to end extremely violently and gruesomely. Kratos ends up like prying off the weapons off of his hands, puts on the gauntlets, and then you just start beating the shit out of him so badly. Like you're ramming him into these spike part of the walls to knock off his armor. Eventually he gets kind of stunned and he's getting beat up, and then you trap him on the ground. I think he's underneath like a pillar that has fallen down, and Kratos just pounds this guy's face over and over and over and over, and it's like, man, that's so gruesome. Like you're just watching it happen, and he's like manhandling this guy. His face is getting smashed in, and eventually the floor breaks and you smash down through the floor. Hercules lands in some water face down, and it's the thing where Kratos is actually underneath him, so it looks like he's starting to get up, but it's really just Kratos moving his dead body off the top of him. Kratos just walks away with his new weapons.
Yeah, he doesn't look back.
And yeah, I like the dynamic between those two characters, and just the escalation from like he thinks he can just let some minions in to take care of Kratos, to like, oh shit, I gotta come deal with this myself, to like getting not only beaten by Kratos, but your weapons taken from you and just humiliated and pounded to death. Like,
yeah,
it's classic God of War, and I really like that.
Especially if you're playing the new God of War as well, which is still quite gruesome and brutal. Like looking back on the older games, like they just took that to such a different extreme, the actual like brutality of Kratos in the game.
I don't know. I feel like he's still brutal. Like he's ripping wings off of guys. Like he does some really violent stuff.
I think he's brutal, but like just the length of time in some of those games where you're just like mercilessly like beating someone and like
I'll never forget when he presses his thumbs right into who does he do that?
I can't remember who it is, but it is you press the both sticks and you're like, why do I need to press both sticks? And it like lines up with the eyes, like like that. It like it's just an extra like level of ridiculousness. I think that the old games like played on versus the newer Kratos has to be it's almost like a little bit more grounded.
Well, he's got his son with him now, you know?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Maybe he has to be a little bit more PG.
Right, it's a little scarring for
maybe just kill them, but don't like maim them brutally before.
Right, exactly.
And, set a good example for the kids.
Respectful kill for your kid,
Jeez. That is getting morbid. How about we move along to some listener mail, Kate?
Okay.
Of course, if you want to write in some listener mail, you can hit us up at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. Just like Matthias did with his question.
Wonderful segue. He asked, and he had a really good example for us too. He asked which you get to swap protagonists in a video game. Which is the best? So he gave us an example as well to play Dark Souls as Spider-Man, which at first sounds like an absolutely ridiculous, like just stupid, silly idea, but it's genuinely really smart and creative because Dark Souls level design is known for having so much verticality in it, and you like traverse. You either go up, you either climb up so high or you descend very low. And like having a character like Spider-Man would be able to tackle that in a totally different way than you have to in Dark Souls. So it's actually really clever and kind of made me feel sad about some of my choices.
You could see how Spider-Man could kind of work in the combat too, like flipping around, and his attacks, they would work.
He's pretty fast and like hand to hand. So anyway, I think that example is better than either of the ones I personally came up with.
Yeah, I like your example, Matthias. If I could throw one out there first, maybe this isn't my number one answer, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to have Phoenix Wright be put in some other detective style games, like maybe a Danganronpa or like a Heavy Rain, or even in Detroit you have Connor, who's a detective with the police force. So I thought maybe just seeing Phoenix in there, put him in
Vampyr.
yeah, just using his detective skills and his quirky mannerisms. Maybe a couple characters could come along with him.
I like
kind of cool. Yeah,
I like that.
Maya Fey and Danganronpa, that'd work.
He could honestly be one of the students.
Yeah, straight up.
Yeah, he really could fit in. Okay, well, I've come up with two. Would you like kind of the more serious or the stupid one first?
Oh, give me the serious one.
Okay, so this one, I don't know exactly which game I would pick, but I thought it'd be interesting to put Mario, but specifically the Mario from Mario Odyssey that comes with Cappy, into like a JRPG, kind of like a Final Fantasy or even like a Monster Hunter kind of thing, because you could use the hat capture mechanic on some of the notable different creatures and monsters in other games.
It's almost, that'd be cool.
Which is kind of interesting. So I don't know which game in particular it would like.
Monster Hunter with that would be awesome.
But I think it'd be
Mario
really
would look
cool.
so weird though, like against there's like some big dragon or something.
He would only fit in kind of with like little cat companion you get. Just be like little and you can just throw his hat every now and again. So.
That's cool. Just to relate back to when I was talking about Hercules, I picked Kratos for one of mine also. Maybe it's a bit of a low-hanging fruit answer, but
sure.
But I think he would be really cool in like a classic beat 'em up kind of game like Streets of Rage or Final Fight.
Yeah,
maybe not something 3D, because he's been in all of the God of War games are like 3D character action type stuff. So I thought maybe in a 2D sense, something like that, or even like as much as I don't like it, Street Fighter type thing, like just putting Kratos. I think he'd be a cool mascot.
He was in one of. Oh, he was in Soul Calibur, I think. Wasn't he?
No, he wasn't.
Was he not?
Which one are you thinking of?
There was or maybe it was Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
there was
I don't know.
one of the fighting games, I believe, that they did like an exclusive character depending on which system you bought it on, and I'm pretty sure
2 had that, but it wasn't Kratos.
Wasn't it Kratos?
It was Heihachi, Spawn, and Link.
I could have sworn that Kratos made it into one of the fighting games.
Maybe he did. I mean, fighting game is not a good example anyway, because they always have such a diverse roster.
I know that's not what you want.
But I'm thinking more like Final Fight, Streets of Rage, maybe even like Devil May Cry, even though that's very similar to God of War. Like just Kratos needs more representation. That's what I'm getting at.
You know what? I'm exactly on your train of thought, because the other answer I came up with is also for Kratos, but I was cracking up at the idea of putting him in like a horror game because like he would just not be having any of their shit. Like,
yeah, right.
I was thinking like
Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, like Kratos in like Resident Evil 7, and like the creepy family comes out to menace him, and he just looks, he's like mildly annoyed at
like,
most.
What the fuck?
He's like, what the fuck? And he just would kill them all and like not be scared at all.
That's a great answer.
That was my idea.
It would almost be like a comedy game with him in there.
Yeah, it really almost would. He like sits down to dinner with the family, and they're like, you better eat this like gross ass stew. We're gonna cut your arm off. And Kratos is like, are you fucking kidding? Like, no.
That's my favorite. That's good.
He just murder them all and like leave the house.
The only other one that I came up with was more of like a universe crossover than it is a character, but I thought it would be cool to put Cal Kestis. He's come up a few times, like when we pick characters too, but I thought he would be cool to integrate into Mass Effect somehow, just because they're both kind of like space drama type things.
Right. And some of the, I guess, like the force abilities are similar to like biotic stuff.
Yeah, I thought like just having a lightsaber would be kind of cool in as like a melee weapon in Mass Effect, and the force obviously would work out. You could have his, whatever spaceships and droids as assistants, like, just maybe not so much him as a character, because I think Commander Shepard's a fine character. More so like I think some integration of like Star Wars technology and lore would go really well in Mass Effect. And also in Mass Effect, it takes place in different galaxies and universes, right? Just like Star Wars. So maybe space is expansive enough where they actually exist in the same universe.
Right, exactly. Maybe you just go like a few more galaxies to the right, and then all of a sudden, like, there you are.
Exactly. Just light speed hop a few more times, and then you're caught in a dogfight in Star Wars, just like Squadrons. And now we're back at the start of the episode.
Wow. Can it beat Bloodborne? How many times does it get to resurface?
Well, we'll wait and see next episode, Kate, but I think that's going to do us for today. So we would always like to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, we are at our email address again, circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. Please write in with some more listener mail questions, because we are always going to do one at the end of the show. And we've been using a few, the people that have written in have given a few different answers. So we're looking for some more variety. Whatever you want to ask us, we're happy to answer it. You can also find us on Twitter at CANDSpod. It's the same on Instagram. So follow us there. And thank you again for listening. We will see you again on the next episode. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.